Hello and welcome back to Future You, the podcast brought to you by graduate careers experts Prospects. I'm your host, Emily Slade, and in this episode, I chat to Helen about being a Scrum Master.
So I'm Helen Garcia and I'm a Scrum Master.
Amazing. What is a Scrum Master?
Quite a common question that we get asked because obviously if you're an engineer or something like that, it kind of comes to mind that you know what it is. But a Scrum Master essentially is a person who works within a development team and they are sort of responsible and accountable for supporting the team with their processes to become more efficient and effective with them. But what I like to add to the role is also looking after the people as well and their well-being. An example of that might be that maybe you're having a team meeting and it's all a little bit chaotic, that nobody knows what's the priority and how things are getting done. As a Scrum Master, you might go in there, you might observe a few things and sort of call out, you know, if we're going to work on something, what would be the highest priority in this situation? And really help the team kind of see the woods through the trees. So essentially, the Scrum Master role falls within a framework called Scrum. And that framework is a way to support organisations to become more agile. So when I talk about agile, it's about being flexible to change. So I always like to give the example of the pandemic. So organisations that kept on doing the same thing over and over and over again, unfortunately, quite a lot of them didn't really survive. But those organisations that went from car manufacturers to, ventilator manufacturers, then they thrived and survived. They never planned to do that. They didn't necessarily, maybe they didn't want to, but they did something to support the value that the customers needed at that time. So that's what I mean when I talk about kind of agile and agile. We talk about it as a mindset because it's a culture thing, rather than a process thing. So that's where Scrum comes in.
Okay, and as a Scrum Master, you tend to be part of a company, or do you tend to be somebody that they bring in from outside?
So you could be contracted into a team, but the idea would be that you would work with that team for a long period of time, because to be able to understand the process and how people kind of tick, you need to be, you need a bit more, I guess, insight. You can't just kind of be dropped in and dropped out. And I think part of the time, it doesn't matter if you're a contractor or if you're a full-time employee, but as long as you're there for an amount of time that's going to be able to be supportive of the product and get to know the people and not just be sort of airdropped in and change a whole bunch of things without having a real understanding. And that can work for any industry. So it's very popular within the tech industry, so developing platforms or whatever it is online. That's going to sound like a really odd lady. Unknown. But actually Scrum in itself, or becoming more agile, can be in the construction industry, it can be anywhere. It's just less popular at the moment, and I think that's something that we really need to grow, because essentially, if you go to, you're building a railway and there's something that doesn't go quite right and you need to block the line, you need to be flexible to change at that point. You need to say, okay, maybe we can't do this bit there, but in order to get closer to our goal, we could do, X, Y, Z. That's the sort of thing that as a Scrum Master, you can help sort of reflect.
Right back to the beginning, what was your educational journey like?
Okay, so you want the honest one? Okay. So I went to university. I started off at university and I had a passion for architecture. And essentially, I went to uni to do that. I realised that it wasn't my passion at all and I didn't want to do it anymore. So I actually dropped out of uni and I applied for all the jobs under the sun. And the job that I ended up getting was a possessions planner for the railway, which basically meant me blocking all the lines from London to Birmingham for maintenance work. So I was really loved, as you can imagine. That introduced me to more project work. So I moved into a project manager role, and I did project management for, maybe 6 and maybe 10 years, something like that. And after a while, I realised that I was super stressed out all the time. And I was like, this is a horrible role. Surely this isn't right and it shouldn't be the way that we're living. And I noticed that actually I was making a lot of the decisions that I had people around me that would be better off making those decisions. I had experts that were working for me. And so, funnily enough, my wife actually did a Scrum Master course randomly, and we had a lot of debates at home saying, no, project management, a linear way of doing things for complexity is so much better, and you've got a plan and you need to stick to that plan. And she was like, no, wouldn't it be better just to be more flexible and as you learn, grow and then change and decide. So what I did is I spent a lot of time in work trying to prove that wasn't the right way of doing things by doing it that way. Turned out that it was really great. And I was like, wow, actually, my stress is a little bit lower. People enjoy coming to work because they're enabled to make decisions, they're empowered to do things differently. And actually, we started to deliver things a lot quicker because we were being flexible to change. We weren't much stuck with the Gantt chart. And I just want to be really clear. Waterfall kind of linear project management is great for really simple tasks because you make a plan and you deliver it by that plan because you know what's going to happen. For more complex tasks, you need to be flexible. So yeah, and then I went on my first Scrum Master course. I think that was about 8 years ago now. And my eyes were kind of opened. I was like, this is amazing. And it's also fun. And that's really important to me in my working life.
Yeah. So when you say a course, was that something run by a university? Was it like workshops what do you mean by a course?
Yeah, so it was run by a training organisation. So there's a couple of different ways that you can, I suppose, start to understand what a Scrum Master does, and that's a Scrum Alliance is an organisation, and the Scrum.org. So Scrum Alliance is very UK based. Scrum.org is US based. So if you go to the Scrum Alliance webpage, there are loads of trainers in there, and I would tell you which trainer I had because he's amazing. So I went with Paul Goddard and Jeff Watts. So Jeff isn't doing the training anymore, but Paul definitely is, and he just brings a new to life. There's no PowerPoint. That is the best thing about it. It's all practicals, and there's loads of breakout rooms. So yeah, so I did that first Scrum Master course, and I was like, wow, this makes a whole load of sense. And it actually took a lot of pressure off me. So as a project manager, you are responsible for so many different things, but essentially it's time, scope and budget, isn't it? Whereas if you put a Scrum hat on, the most important thing in your delivery is the quality. So often if you're delivering to a deadline, the quality sort of drops and drops and drops, doesn't it? And it gets more and more expensive, you put more and more people on it, and you kind of end up delivering something that's a bit mediocre. Whereas if we work in a more agile way, the quality is our driver. Like, we want to be able to deliver the best quality thing. And so if that means that what you want is we do it in small batches, we know that we're always going to be delivering to the top quality. And that was a real eye opener to me. And I also realised as a Scrum Master, I don't have to be completely responsible for absolutely everything in the team. My team are responsible and accountable. It actually talks about accountabilities, accountable for delivering the quality of the work. And I know this sounds really basic and really simple, but you just don't get that in project-driven teams that are more waterfall. So that was great. So I did that course. I then started to play a lot within the teams that I was in. So I was like, I'm not going to, because they talk about never say agile in an organisation because it's like a swear word. Yeah. So oh God, no, we don't want to do things agile because that means you'll just be changing your requirements all the time, and that's really not the case. And so I started to experiment with an organisation. He was a farmer organisation that I was working with at the time. And after a couple of years, I could do the next step up of my Scrum Mastery. So it's called, I think it's called Advanced Scrum Master in the Scrum Alliance, and in Scrum.org it's called Professional Scrum Master 2. And they're very similar. And actually what I will call out is that from my experience, having done Scrum.org things and Scrum Alliance things, is the Scrum Alliance really support the coaching and behavioural side of things. So I think that's really, really important. Looks at the values, looks at behaviours, looks at, how you can help a team without telling them what to do. From a Scrum.org perspective, they definitely look at the values, they look at all those foundational pieces, but it is it's very much focused on kind of the process of Scrum from my experience of training. So I think for sort of people listening, if you're more people orientated, I'd go with Scrum Alliance. If you're more kind of process and analytical and that sort of orientated, then go down the Scrum.org road.
What kind of person would make a good Scrum Master?
Someone that's able to listen before they speak and advise. Someone that cares about people. And someone that's able to be fairly level-headed. So in the Scrum Master role, you will be bombarded from many different angles, and not only just from your team, but everybody. I mean, I've worked with C-suite people, so you're dealing with lots of different characters and lots of different power dynamics. So you need to be able to listen and be level-headed. Now that definitely didn't come to me at first. I was like the opposite of everything like that. So I think that's important. That'll definitely help you move on your journey. I think anybody who is willing to experiment and learn and accept that actually their idea is never going to be your best idea, that's all you really need, because that's what you're there for. You can make a suggestion to see if something would work, but if the whole team are like, nah, you know what, Helen, that is not what we want to do, don't then be going in and saying, actually, that's what we're going to do, because you need to be able to step back and say, you know what, even if I know their idea is going to fail because I've seen it before, let them fail, because by failing, you're learning, and you're building character, and you're building a team to like get together and be like, you know what, this didn't go right, and we're going to do something different. And I think you need somebody who's able to accept that. And that, again, is quite difficult. Yeah. Because your idea is always the best idea, right? Yeah. So, yeah.
What would you say is the most challenging part of being a Scrum Master?
Everything. Is that allowed? The people. So I always think it's funny because we focus on product teams. So if you're building a product, I mean, it's not always product teams, but if you're building a product or something, then it's usually complex. But for me, my product is the people, and everybody is different. That is the hardest thing. And coming back to that point of like the different power dynamics, it can be really draining. As a Scrum Master, you kind of show up, and I suppose if I thought about an image, you're kind of a battery charger. So you go in and, you need to be fairly upbeat. If everybody is really drained and feeling a bit rubbish, like, you need to be the one being like, come on, we can do this. How are we going to do this? Who knows? Let's work it out, but we can do it. And there are definitely days I don't feel like that. And that's really hard. To be able to come in. But what I would say, it's like anything. My mum used to say to me, like, even if you come out of bed and you feel a bit rubbish, like, put on a smile and almost like fake it till you make it. And I think that kind of works in this role as well. It's like, you always come out being like, you know what? Like, that was actually a good day. Yeah, it was really difficult, but it was a good day. So yeah, the people were very challenging. And I think part of that is because you're not a manager, and that's really key. For me, that's the beauty of the role. So if you are the sort of person that wants to go up the ranks and manage people, this is definitely not the role for you, because you don't manage anybody. You've got to influence without any power. And that's very difficult because people can just choose not to listen to you. So you've got to be fairly sort of hard-skinned to be, again, that's okay. And I've done my best job. It's also a thankless job. I think most of these, I'm making it sound awful, but I'd rather just say it and put it out there. Nobody will ever thank you for being a Scrum Master, because you're difficult, because you're looking at process, you're protecting your team, and you're trying to make change. And change naturally is really hard. You're often not thanked for that. So one of the things that I do actually is I have a value diary. So if for whatever reason I should receive a thank you, then I'll pop it in there. Otherwise, I will. This sounds really sad, but it's like rewarding. The value diaries are great. And this is not my own invention. So there's a lady called Lisa Adkins, who is like the queen of agile coaching. And she created this, I think, because of these things of not being thanked or not being really understood why you necessarily, giving your all, basically. And part of that is, you might run a particular workshop and everybody goes away, you don't get any recognition for that or anything like that. And you might be like, okay, well, part of the value that I've brought today is help people see and get a bit of clarity through all the priorities, that they now left that session and thought, yeah, you know what, we're going to focus on A. And then once A is done, you can focus on B. So just it sounds like small things, but it can be really helpful, and it can really like lower that overwhelm, that stress that people experience at work. That you know we really don't have to work like that. It can be different. And that's what drives me. So although there are a lot of things that are challenging, I think if you can cope with that and you can recognize actually you'll make a difference to someone's working life, and it may mean that's one less person leaving the organization. It may mean that's one person who's able to spend more time with their family, and one person who just feels less stressed at work. And I think for me, that's what makes the difference.
So, what does a typical day look like for you?
Well, like, it looks a little bit, yeah, no, so the typical day. So the day in the life of a Scrum Master, if you've got the Scrum framework in place, essentially might be you get in at 9:30, you'll meet with your team for 15 minutes. And in that 15-minute session, you will talk about what your plan is for the day. So, and literally, what is your focus to get us towards the goal that we've agreed, which we agreed before. By the end of the week, we would get to X, Y, Z. And is there anything that's stopping you from being able to do that? So might be the sort of things that you address at the daily. And where there are things stopping, and the team have tried to unblock their own sort of sticking points, as a Scrum Master, you might say, okay, like, is there anything that I can help? And if there is it, it could be anything. You need an extra skill in the team. You need whatever you might be. You might go off after your daily and talk to the relevant people. They may be really high up. They may be, at the development team level, whatever it might be. So you go and do that. Other things that you might do are just catching up with your team on one-to-one basis, like, how are you? I care. Not, how are you? And by the way, you've got X, Y, Z to do. That's a very clear difference. And the other things you might see areas within the way that your team works, like, for example, maybe you had a situation the week before where there was a bit of conflict within the team and they didn't really know how to manage that. You might then start to be, okay, well, I'm going to run a conflict management or a conflict workshop. So that's part of, I guess, the sort of training. I might just mention, if it's all right, as a Scrum Master, you wear multiple different hats. And we talk about these as sort of Scrum Master stances. So you might be a coach one day, a trainer the next day, or a teacher, I should say, the next day. You might be a facilitator. You might be various different things. And so you'll play one of those hats, essentially. So coming back to the day in the life of a Scrum Master, you had your daily, discussed with the team, tried to unblock a few things that they can't unblock, meet with a team member, check in how they are. You might then start to plan another one of the events. So there's 5 events in Scrum, and one of those is at the end of kind of your week, or the end of your 2 weeks. You'll have something called a retrospective, and at that point you'll kind of look back and say, what is it that we did well, what didn't we do so well, and what can we improve? And so you'll start to gather that information, plan those workshops. That might be part of your day. I'm trying to think what else you do. It ends up being quite busy, I should say. You often get quite a few people reaching out to you to be like, oh, I've noticed that we've got this random thing that nobody is looking at. Can you help with, like, trying to source where the best place it is for it to go? Like, does it sit in your team or something like that? Or if you've got other Scrum Masters in the organisation, you might reach out to them and say, we've got this problem. It seems to go across multiple different teams. What do we need to do in order to move it forward or put that forward? So it's very much, I guess you've got a good balance of juggling multiple things that might kind of be thrown your way, knowing which one to throw back their way, knowing which one to take away. But also you've got the structure of the Scrum framework, which is planning workshops. You've got refinement workshops, so looking at all the requirements that are coming and refining that with your team. You've got your retrospective, which is sort of the learning side of things, and then you've got your dailies, which happen every day. And then outside of that, you can just focus on what part of this process isn't really working and how can I help the team progress that. So it's really varied.
It's interesting that you mentioned that an organization might have scrum masters. So in theory, in the future, do you think every team in every organization will have a scrum master attached to it?
I don't think every team in an organization. So part of that kind of agile mindset is that there's various different frameworks and processes that you could use, and Scrum is just one of those. I think it would be great that organizations that work on complex things do apply some sort of agile framework to help them get to that point. And yeah, it would be great if it was full of Scrum Masters because we're amazing people. And there's various different levels. So just, I think before I was touching on, you've got, the foundation Scrum Master, and then you've got level 2 and you've got level 3. A lot of people stop at that level 2 and you're really missing out. It's really worth going to the other levels because actually it's more than just setting up a Scrum framework in an organization. That's easy peasy. It's when you get to those more challenging conversations, those, how do I help, like I say, the team manage or work through problems? Like, what tools are there out there that can help me do that? How can I coach the individuals on, getting better at their job? That might be something you meet with someone on. So yeah, it's really worth working your way up because it's like in any role, you may not go and do a certification in something because, well, what does that really mean? You've done a course, right? But it is important to keep learning as a Scrum Master and kind of live by that idea of, empiricism, of, inspecting, adapting and growing.
So what advice would you give for somebody looking to become a Scrum Master?
I would say do the course, do the PMS one. I recommend, again, it might be a bit controversial, but doing a coaching course. So I'm also an accredited coach. So I specialise in ADHD and assertive coaching, and I found that really helpful because actually it's really easy to give advice to a team because, like I say, you have your ideas, you have this, but actually to have the training, the experience of being able to ask questions that help people progress forward is not necessarily something that you'd get in your first Scrum Master course, and that's why I always say go up the tiers. I'd then say try it out in your organisation. You don't have to call it Scrum, you don't have to call it dailies, but you can experiment. You can say, what if we met for 15 minutes and we just kind of aligned on what we were going to do for the day? Like, does that work? Because you're not going to do your qualification then suddenly get a Scrum Master job, and that just doesn't happen anyway, does it? Unless you're doing something very vocational. So I would do that. And then I would, after 2 years, you can then do your second level. I'd recommend doing that, highly recommend doing that. I'd also, in between that time, like, get into the Agile community, because if you go on LinkedIn, you just tap in like Scrum Master. I've had people reach out to me completely randomly being like, I want to become a Scrum Master, I don't know why, would you mind giving me 15 minutes of your time? Do that. Like, you can reach out to me. I'd happily speak to people because I think it's an area that is just full of opportunity that we're not quite grasping. And because being a project manager is just really, people know what that is, right? It's a good job. Yeah, so I would do those two things. And then after a couple of years, after you've done your PSM2, I'd go on to do your PSM3. That PSM3 very much focuses a lot more on coaching and how to develop teams from good to great. I'd also recommend loads of books. Probably the key one would be, so Jeff Sutherland is kind of the creator, the father of Scrum, and he wrote a book called Twice the Work in Half the Time, which, take that with a pinch of salt, because it doesn't actually mean that. I really dislike the title. Anyway, really good book. Because that kind of describes Agile in its kind of core, and how Scrum can support you get into that real iterative way of developing products or developing things. I'd also recommend another book by Lisa Adkins. It's actually called Agile Coaching, but essentially an Agile coach is a Scrum Master with a bit more experience and maybe can maybe can support a couple of other teams. So I'd recommend reading that, because first of all, you'll learn about the value tree, your value diary, but there's other exercises in there that can be really helpful for new Scrum Masters, I think. And she writes it so beautifully, because she used to be a project manager. I think she used to be known as a bulldog or something like that. And weirdly, I actually used to be known like that, because I was like under so much pressure and you just didn't get stuff done. So you read through that journey, and it's very insightful. Nice. So read lots, join agile communities, and do a couple of certs.
So what are some common pitfalls or mistakes that new Scrum Masters fall into?
Being the receptionist for the team or the secretary. Yeah. So they might be like, we've set up all the meetings, all the events, taking notes and chasing tickets. That isn't your job. Don't do it. Booking meetings for people. The whole idea is for you to help your team be self-managing. You want to make yourself not needed for the team, because as soon as you're not needed for the team, you can go out and do really cool things with the organization. So you can act as that change agent of, like I say, I was working with C-suite to be able to be like, yeah, you can do this too. You're a team. We can do things differently. Here are the values. Here is this thing. So the idea is for them not to rely on you. And you see that all the time. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I see quite a lot is, probably going to get a little bit of like pushback on this, but mandating all of Scrum in its framework, which is a very good idea and at the end is good. But sometimes people just aren't ready for that. And that's okay. If you come in there just ripping out all of their processes and then just doing a blueprint of Scrum, people get really annoyed with that. And I know that because I've done it, like, as a new Scrum Master. So try and avoid that and try and just experiment, just as Scrum does, and just as, the whole mindset of Agile is being experimental and being, open to change, is I might just experiment with, how does this work? And like be ready to leave it. So I sort of come back to that. You don't need to have like a university degree or anything to become a Scrum Master. And I think you could probably come out and just do it. And I guess I think that's kind of the beauty of it. Yeah. You know what? The other thing that I'd say is it's actually helpful not to be an expert in the particular thing that the person is developing. So, for example, sometimes you get programmers who move into a Scrum Master role, and that's really great. But the problem is, if you've got some sort of expertise or knowledge in something, is that you're more inclined to be like, you should do it this way. And yeah, maybe they should, and maybe that'd be great. But again, it doesn't matter. Let people experiment, unless you're putting the business or the quality at risk. And actually, I suppose that, so to come back to kind of the Scrum Master, or what you should be wary of, is exactly that. Like, it's so easy. And actually, I'm seeing it a little bit in myself at the moment, to be kind of drawn into the problems and the issues that are going on. And actually, there are times where that could be helpful, but be very self-aware of being able to drag yourself out of that and be like, okay, I get it that maybe we need to focus on this, but let's kind of take a step back, because you're sort of that calm, supposed to be that calm person. Have your head on, all of that sort of stuff. So I think that could be that you can really easily get into that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure to meet you.
Thanks again to Helen for their time. For more information on becoming a Scrum Master, head to prospects.ac.uk. If you enjoyed the episode, feel free to leave us a review on Apple or Spotify. For a full-length video version of the episode, make sure to check out our YouTube channel at FutureYouPod. Thank you, as always, for listening, and good luck on your journey to Future You.